Tips from Trestle is brought to you by E-Menu Choice Point of Sale and Clark Food Service Equipment. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Today on Tips from Trestle, I'm joined by Dan Lawson. Dan is the co-founder and president of business development for Viking Pure Solutions. Dan co-founded Viking Pure to introduce a disruptive, patent-protected, and environmentally conscious technology to transform cleaning and infection control in senior living communities. He is dedicated to creating a movement to remove toxic chemicals from the environment and to challenge the status quo of what it means to truly clean and disinfect safely, sustainably, and effectively. Dan, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. It's an honor to be invited to come on that forum. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I know we've gone back and forth over the last couple of years and trying to find a good time. So I'm glad we were able to make it happen. So I always ask, a first-time guest, how did you get into this part of the space? How did you get into senior living? Because obviously everybody has a unique journey getting here.
Yeah, that's a great question. I love when I'm presented with the opportunity to kind of answer that. Senior living is actually in my DNA. I grew up in the space. It's been a part of my life since I was a child. I was fortunate to grow up, in an environment, that was dedicated to serving seniors. My dad was, kind of an OG, original founder for Brandywine Senior Living back in the early 90s. And Brandywine was very close, obviously to our family. And we have many extended, kind of family members, still with the organization. So definitely grew up, one level or so of separation, away from the space, but have always held a very special place in my heart, for the senior living space, even though it took, about 12 years, 13 years of my career kind of outside of the space, to identify an opportunity and a need to then be able to directly serve seniors again. So,
yeah. What I find is either you stumble across senior living or you were raised in it, right? And
yep. Totally.
But you kind of segue nicely into finding the why or the reason to get back into it, and that's Viking Pure Solutions. And so I wanted you to kind of talk a little bit about the need you saw with it, the opportunity for not just a business opportunity, but there's something different about what Viking does and kind of your passion and the mission around it. And I think it's such a great story for operators in general to hear.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So just to kind of go back a little bit, long before I was kind of directly serving seniors, I spent, several years in the medical device space. I was super passionate about introducing kind of novel technology, specifically in spine surgery. For over 12 years, I would literally, be in the operating room working with physicians as they're implanting these different types of devices.
Oh,
and always cool. Really enjoyed. Yeah, it was super cool. Definitely a unique job. Not always for those of, of weak stomachs, if you will.
Right.
But no, it was an awesome experience. And it really exposed me to a lot of different things, in working with these physicians and in working in these type of environments, surgical site infections, hospital acquired infections, were and really continue to be, a tremendous challenge.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, working closely with a surgeon who, was utilizing a solution to wash, out patients, surgical wounds, to wash, out patients who maybe have had some sort of like a surgical site infection. They were using this chemical that was called hypochlorous acid. And I was fascinated by the chemical because it had this ability to kill all of the different types of germs, that would be causing this infection inside
Mhm.
of the wound, but it wouldn't hurt or burn, the patient when it was applied to the wound. So I kind of, had a hard time, at the time wrapping my head around scientifically how that's even possible, right? Like everything
Right.
we know about chemicals is that, they need to be toxic in order to be effective. So I started doing some research, on hypochlorous acid, or HOCl for short, and just became infatuated with the science, behind this chemical, the fact that our bodies naturally produce HOCl, kind of as a native or a natural infection prevention method within, our own immune systems to kill invading germs. And then I like started looking into, some very established, peer reviewed scientific literature that shows its ability to be generated through very simple ingredients, literally just water, salt, and electricity. Need to come together in like a very specific way to create this chemical, and it can be used abundantly and kind of liberally throughout an environment, not just as a like a wound cleanser, which is
Yeah.
how I was initially introduced to it, but as an environmental, cleaning and kind of, disinfectant. So, naturally, at that time, and this was about 2014, 2000, I thought that because of my familial ties and my understanding of the senior living space and the challenges in senior living to keep communities, healthy, that there may be a way to introduce a completely non-toxic chemical that could be used in ways that traditional chemicals cannot, to really help protect the community from, the communal illnesses that we see, yearly.
Yeah.
So again, like long before COVID, flu, norovirus, would really, run through these communities. They would force quarantines, isolation. At the time, I felt like I saw an opportunity, and because again of the familial tie, was able to bring this technology, to the decision makers within a handful of different operators throughout the country, and really trial it to see if it was going to make an effective difference. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, it's fascinating because it's kind of the journey of, well, this is kind of a pet project. It's something I'm curious about, I'm learning about, and then it's kind of that it all comes together in that aha moment of, oh, this can have a big impact and it can really change the approach we take to the senior living industry. Because one of the things that I know we've talked about is thinking about how chemicals can be used in that setting, right? We think about all the various levels of care, all the things that we have to think about when introducing a chemical which can be toxic into that environment. There are, I will leave the guilty unnamed, but there have been horror stories about
totally.
chemicals and how the residents have ingested them, and
Yeah.
really bad things have happened. And so looking at that, you've seen this opportunity. And so, uh, how did this now you've got this product that has this non-toxic component. How does that approach of integrating it into these settings work? And how do you take advantage of that and bring that additional value to the space?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, those kind of worst case scenarios that you were just talking about, a few minutes ago, are, a big part of our why and our mission, right? Which is to remove toxic chemicals from the environment. And, we're fortunate with Viking Pure to serve the senior living space, but, we also serve, several other industries where it's equally as important to create, kind of this safe environment like schools, food processing, all types of, hospitals, all types of different environments. But what's unique, about the senior living space is that ironically, there is no standard of care, when it comes to the types of chemicals that you need to purchase to protect your community, how many different chemicals you need to purchase to protect your community. And what we started learning as we were, introducing ourselves, our value proposition, and kind of like this paradigm shift away from the standards of buying chemicals, storing chemicals, and using them, is that many senior living communities are using 15, 16, sometimes more, different
Yeah.
products, like, right? Like throughout their entire environment, because every chemical has its own application, that it's meant to be used for, like a floor cleaner, glass cleaner, carpet cleaner, your disinfectant. It's like now you got to use all these other products in the kitchen because you've got food surfaces that you're preparing, right? So you
Yeah.
can't use the same stuff. So we really, I think, identified an outdated, aspect of our industry, in the sense when you open up a, kind of an environmental service closet or a dining closet, you look in there and you see 15 different chemicals on the shelf, and like that just seems crazy, right?
It
So
is.
when we came, what our technology does, and let me back up a little bit just so people understand, but Viking Pure Solutions is a manufacturer, and what we do is we build a machine that's called an electrolyzed water generator. It's a really fancy way of describing how water, salt, and electricity come together to create two very powerful but different solutions. What happens is salt, sodium chloride, gets separated inside of our machine into its two main components, sodium hydroxide and hypochlorous acid. Those are then added to fresh streams of water, and you get basically these two byproducts of each other that have equal but different applications. The hypochlorous product is what we call Viking Pure Disinfectant, and that's what will kill any germ, fungus, mold or bacteria, virus, and would be used in all of the different ways that sanitizers or disinfectants would be used inside of your community, high touch surfaces, things like that.
Yeah.
The other product that's created is what we call Viking Pure Cleaner. And that is really what we call, kind of internally at Viking Pure, our sleeper product, because that ends up, really outperforming all of these different types of chemicals that the communities are currently using for floors, carpet, glass. All of those different applications are consolidated into, the Viking Pure Cleaner. And what our goal is when we go into a community is, hey, you're using like 15 or 16 or more different chemicals right now. We're going to introduce this technology that is going to just hook up to your water. You're going to plug it in. You're going to put a little salt in it every now and then. And then the machine is just going to dispense automatically these two products that are going to replace this variety, right? That you're using now, that you're buying now, that you're diluting now, that you're handling, and you're no longer going to have to buy chemical. You're not going to have to store it. And you're most importantly not going to have to use it. So, for your frontline workers, for your residents, like for the benefit of the surfaces, kind of throughout your community, like everybody is going to win. And you're going to be making all of these products unlimited on site inside of the community. So from a sustainability perspective, from an ultimately preparedness perspective, like you are, really set up, with Viking Pure to, to manage all of your daily needs, today and kind of, throughout the term of our agreement together. So we hope that it's, that it's just a much more simple, obviously sustainable and more effective, alternative to, just buying just random products for all of these different needs.
Technology continues to drive changes in senior care, and that includes food service. eMenu Choice is an award-winning point-of-service application for managing the dining function in senior living communities. This mobile, touchscreen-enabled software enhances the dining experience for residents while streamlining processes for staff. The flexibility and functionality of eMenu Choice makes it an effective solution for any type of senior living environment, from independent and assisted living to skilled nursing facilities. It works for production kitchens or restaurant-style service with options for per meal or a la carte pricing, and accommodates a variety of payments, including bill to account, meal credits, and credit cards. Created by a senior care provider with more than a century of experience serving older adults, eMenu Choice eliminates communication barriers between staff and residents while enabling person-centered choices and greater resident satisfaction. eMenu Choice, transforming dining for senior living.
When I hear you talk about like the details of the process and how it's all done, I start thinking about the community experience for those in the community. And I think a lot of times we get really focused on that resident experience, which is absolutely important. But you're talking about creating a different experience and process for the residents, but also for their families, for the employees, for the managers. And now all of a sudden, this kind of all coming together to make life a little bit better for everybody. And so when you think about like activities of daily living and what caregivers have to do, and especially
Yeah.
around operators that maybe are using some universal workers, what kind of experiences have you seen with introducing this and how it impacts those that you're serving?
Yeah. Well, this is like my favorite part of what we do, mostly because as you can imagine, right? Like the technology is always met with skepticism up front, right?
Right.
It's like, yeah, how is this like so simple but so effective, and why have I never heard of it before, right? Well, the usual answer is like, well, you heard of it today, so now how does your life change, right? Like after today. But yeah, no, most of the time, like there's obviously some challenge, right? Like in the believability of it. But our goal with Viking Pure, is not just to like put these machines out there and act as like kind of like a normal chemical company. We're very committed to education, to certification, and to bring as much awareness to the unfortunate effects of dangerous and toxic chemicals and what those effects have on us, whether or not we are delegated with cleaning and disinfecting in the facilities, right? Like the
Yeah.
chemicals that are being used in these communities obviously can affect the residents, obviously can affect those that are applying the chemicals, but also are going to affect anybody that's also sharing that space. There's very, unfortunate data today that we have access to that's, peer reviewed, published at the highest levels that show that exposure to normal kind of run of the mill day to day chemicals that we have in our homes, that we have at places of work, have a direct effect on our ability to breathe, have a direct effect on the cognitive, capabilities of our mind. Obviously, in worst case scenarios, coming in contact with these in concentrate can burn and destroy our skin and our immune system. And we're very passionate about, obviously highlighting these types of things. And what we see more often than not, because, we work with, obviously those at the top that are, kind of signing the contracts, leading these organizations, but we spend most of our time at the ground level with your frontline workers who are responsible for keeping your communities beautiful and safe. And the challenges of using day-to-day chemicals is very real. And we have a young woman who works in a hospital system that we serve in Florida of African American descent, who was actually, excluded from, the majority of her, kind of work that her team would do because of the reactions that she would have, right? Like to these kind of run of the mill chemicals. They were
Yeah.
literally depigmenting her skin. And this was, something that kind of forced her to have to clean and like less than desirable areas,
Mhm.
and when we went and we met with her and she was talking about like, yeah, like I've got to use these gloves. I've got to make sure that, when I'm handling these chemicals, I'm not over concentrating them because in addition to kind of changing the color of my skin, like, the long-term effects of this have been studied and it looks like it could cause cancer, so she was very like, I'm all about, trying to change something up. And since we've been able to integrate, Viking Pure, inside of, this location, she no
Mm.
longer, kind of is isolated doing this specific work. She's able to join her team. And because they generate an unlimited amount of product on site within her facility, she's able to bottle solution, take solution home, use it in her home. She doesn't have to, really worry about kind of extending, these hazards, which I think unless you're kind of delegated with these responsibilities on a day-to-day basis, you don't maybe necessarily know happen, right?
Yeah.
So that's like super gratifying for us, to be able to do that. But to kind of compound the second part of your question, when you're integrating, the mission, right, of removing toxic chemicals from a senior living community, you're opening up the opportunity for that community to even further commit to their service, right? Like to their residents. And we've got some amazing stories. I met a man in Dallas named Jim, who lives at a memory care community there that we serve. And Jim he's a super, active, man. And I'll never forget, visiting the community for the first time. He almost acted as like a tour guide. He came up to me and introduced himself, asked why
Mhm.
I was there. We sat there and talked for a while. And he was involved with, some of their programming, their Montessori based programming to just kind of maintain his independence and some of his, different, through different types of activities, throughout
Yeah.
the day. And I remember one thing they were working on that day was, packing some school bags together for the kids at the beginning of the school year this year. He was organizing, he was super excited. A couple of months went by after they integrated our technology, and I got some amazing feedback and some pictures where, they'll do some arts and crafts and some different things. And, they're now like allowing, Jim and others, kind of within the community to use the products, right? Like to clean their
Wow.
space, to clean their apartments, to do some things that we may consider kind of, not like that big of a deal, right? But to see the level of enthusiasm and that it gives, not just the resident, but the caregivers, right? Like that they can safely put
Yeah.
something in their hands, just try to, to give them as much of an opportunity to preserve, those small aspects of independence is very gratifying, for what we do. And it's exactly why we started Viking Pure. I mean, that is literally, the reason why we just, we decided to kind of risk it all and go all in.
Yeah. That story, I mean, because one of the things I always struggle with, especially when you think about memory care, is like, what are we doing to preserve as much dignity and as much function as we can for these residents, right? And something like, oh, well, we've got to clean the room for them feels very protective and very like, well, we got to do that for them because they're not capable. When really, like you're saying, like there's no way with traditional chemicals that they
No.
could be doing that. But that
Yeah.
activity, they're in their home. They're like, well, I cleaned up after I made a mess, so I need to continue to do that. And it's almost like this, it keeps them engaged, and the more engaged they are, the better they'll be and the longer their life will be and the more fulfilled it'll be. And so bringing that kind of full circle like that is, yeah, really awesome. And, it's you're getting the place clean and disinfected at the same time.
Yeah, totally.
So
So, I mean, like, to be able to, so when I told you that we're committed to education, one of the, yeah, I just had a conversation with a new group that we're going to be working with. And it was kind of like on a rollout call. And we were speaking to, some of the executive directors, et cetera. And a question that I posed to the group was, in the world that we live in now, senior care, and the need to bring as much awareness to your community, who here is using the chemicals in their environmental service closet as a point of difference? And, they don't have Viking Pure yet. And every single one of them was like, yeah, like we never talk about that. Right. So,
yeah,
something that's really important for us is that our communities feel special, when they integrate this, and what we commit to, in addition to his amazing service and responsiveness, et cetera, is to, encouraging, our communities, one, obviously to remove all of the previously used toxic chemicals, but after they've done that, to engage in what we call our antimicrobial certification program, which is a full complementary, education platform that when completed, by not just environmental services and dietary, but executive directors, marketing, activity directors, et cetera, our medical advisory board will lend their credibility to their community and actually deem them antimicrobial certified.
wow,
So that when they're touring, they can speak. Resident safety, is like the number one or number two, primary concern.
absolutely,
And when they're answering like how they ensure, and preserve resident safety throughout their environment, one thing that they can speak to is this antimicrobial certification through the removal of toxic chemicals from the environment. So one, they're prepared, right, for the next
Mhm.
variant of COVID or flu or norovirus that may make its way through. But they've also, committed to this way of stabilizing and preserving these activities of daily living, through again, like an often overlooked opportunity where people want to be able to clean their own space, right? So,
Yeah.
and they could do that at no additional cost. They're making literally an unlimited amount of these chemicals, and we want them to give them out. So, go for it.
Yeah. No, the whole story as kind of come together here at the end, it's such a great way to, you don't think about chemicals really. They're kind of an afterthought. Like we got to have them, we got to keep clean, but to be able to almost bring them to the forefront is something that I've always been fascinated with what you guys do. And so how can the listeners learn more about Viking Pure, connect with you guys, maybe
Yeah.
even get you guys in the community for a demo and some testing?
Yeah. So obviously, like if interested, you can contact me, www.vikingpure.com as well. We've got, ways of kind of getting a hold of us there. We're very active on the social channels, LinkedIn, Instagram, et cetera. You'll see us there. We know, that this technology is a bit different. And just like with really any chemical that you'd want to try before you buy, Viking Pure has a completely risk-free no cost trial program where, we'll allow you to pick a location or two, install one of our units and engage in our onboarding and education process, and then really allow us to prove, the effectiveness, of these solutions once integrated. So would love to hear from you, and if given the opportunity, promise not to let you down.
Dan, I appreciate you coming on and telling the story and really bringing something new and different and innovative to senior living space with Viking
Thank you.
Pure. So thanks for joining today on Tips from Trestle.
Yeah. Aaron, thank you, man. Great platform, and keep doing what you're doing. It's so important.
Thank you. So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.